Welcome to a panel discussion. Dear delegates, should you have any questions, you may post them in the Q&A tab, which is at the bottom of your screens. Should time permit, we will be able to take those up for you. Well, in human labor, there's a significant risk of mistakes, and repeated work may become tedious and monotonous. Automation has emerged as a viable option since it eliminates the need for human interaction, as well as all types of mistakes and loopholes. Intelligent Process Automation (IPA), which combines artificial intelligence and robotic process automation, automates, integrates, and manages digital processes across a variety of platforms to make labor more efficient. In this discussion titled Tech-nifying Vision, Automating the Future of Businesses, we have with us our esteemed speakers. Mr. Manish Shah, Vice President, Southeast Asia, Verint. Mr. Ravi Vasantraj, Senior Vice President and Global Head, Business Process Services, Mphasis. We are hoping that Mr. Mukesh Jain, CTIO and VP Insights and Data, Capgemini India, should join us shortly. Aarati Kumar, co-founder and COO, MattsenKumar LLC. We welcome you, ma'am. Mr. Sudhir Dasamantharao, Director, Global Business Services and Chief Transformation Officer, APAC, Boston Scientific. Shivakumar Ganesan, co-founder and CEO, Exotel. Well, thank you so much to all our dignitaries for joining us. And now I request our moderator, Mr. Kamesh Srinivasan, Associate Partner, Digital Lighthouse, Data and Analytics Practice, KPMG, to kindly kickstart this conversation with this very eminent panel. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Deepti. My name is Kamesh and I'm super excited to be here today. And what a day to discuss a fantastic topic with a versatile panel that we have today. We all know customers are the original change makers. They shape markets, they reshape industries, and they change business models. The outsourcing industry is not insulated to this much. The industry has been a bellwether of transformations so far, right from being a standalone service provider for telemarketing to setting up global delivery platforms, and currently the journey of being value creators. The response has been phenomenal. And everyone watched the way the industry responded to the COVID-19 challenges through agility, through preparedness, and commitment to a purpose. This time, though, it's a completely different ballgame. The urgency to deliver value through digital transformation and analytics is massive. Right? And as I would like to say, we're going through a tectonic shift. There are too many questions and challenges around moving away from a linear cost arbitrage-driven business to a digitally transformed, value-driven business. Do we even have enough business value that can get generated from digital? Is the ecosystem ready for this? Are we seeing changes in the business model, in the pricing model, in the way people work? At the outset, is the industry even ready for this? And to answer all these questions and many more which would possibly come in from all the audience that we have here, we have some of the best minds in the industry and a matching moderator here today to take us through all these questions. Right? Let me just introduce my panel members today, and then we will get on to what we are here for an exciting 45 minutes of opinion sharing. Right? The first to come is Ravi Vasantraj from Mphasis. Ravi brings in hands-on opinion about digital domain, business, and people management based on his experience of setting up and running multiple service delivery shops. Ravi is anchored on the belief that domain skills will be the game changer for the future. What Ravi Jadeja is for the CSK, Ravi Vasantraj is for the bank. Welcome, Ravi. Aarati Kumar. Aarati is the vice oracle of the team who's been there, done this for multiple decades. Right from the days of having to ship VoIP phones and standing in the customs line to get delivered, to having set up an AI-enabled automated bot that could answer customer calls. She has been through the journey, having to set up, scale multiple BPOs, starting from scratch. And she will bring in a rich experience around the SME segment of this industry. Right? And how do we handle restless dreams to innovations? We have Manish. Manish is an industry veteran and a key opinion maker in the shared services industry. Manish brings in rich experience around digital transformations, AI in customer engagements and productization of business needs. He will share his experience and use cases around digital transformations for the outsourcing industry. Shiv Kumar Ganesan from Exotel. Shiv is a sharpshooter when it comes to understanding the industry's pulse. He's a serial entrepreneur, believes that the future is secure when it is cloud and shared economy enabled. Right? She will bring in this experience of having to deal with data analytics and this experience in having to deal with this industry when it's going through this transformation phase. Sudhir is a well-known voice in the shared services industry for his ability to bring in all of the ecosystem to drive value for his business, and that is par excellence. Sudhir has built, scaled, and transformed multiple businesses and been a consultant earlier. So he knows both sides of his coin like the back of his hand. Sudhir is the Virat Kohli of this team, right? Although he has a better record, let me tell you why. Sudhir has, in the recent past, won many awards for Boston Scientific for the value that they generate, more awards than what Virat has won from the recent ICC tournaments. And finally, the moderator of this panel is no less experienced and can bring in the versatility that the panel needs. But the only skill I will bring in today is to put each one of them in the hot seat by asking the right questions. Are you going to know? Great. First one, Sudhir, for you. Is it really true that we're in the midst of a rapid pace of digital and analytics intervention? Is it actually helping industry transition from being a cost center to fully responsible business unit?
Kamesh, thanks for that. Certainly, I would say with 100% confidence that irrespective of the businesses, irrespective of the industry you're into, what is transforming businesses, transforming the processes, in fact, transforming the new skill set is all about the technology. And I have seen the people who are early adapters to this technological changes. And as we all experience that earlier days, any new technology should take at least a 5 years time span to bring in new technology. Now that's not the case. So any organization, any individual who is able to get onto the fast-paced technological changes and bring it that capabilities back into their own organizations are the one organizations who are able to lead the change. And speaking about Boston Scientific, we are a medical device company. And our devices are not just a mechanical devices, they're also digital devices, what we implant. Whether it's implanting the chips, collecting the data of the patients, and everywhere this technology is really, really advancing, not only the science, but also the business ecosystem, which we capitalize on. Especially on the manufacturing side, you all know that supply chain is a big piece. And being part of the shared services, people think it is only a back office. No more the concept of shared service remaining as a back office in terms of concepts. But it's a value being driven through utilizing this technology and upskilling the resources in the shared service industry or the BPOs is where we are able to add true value to the business, back to the business. And to your question in terms of moving away from just a cost conscious BPO or shared services to value based shared services and organization, and nothing else purely because of the technology is what is enabling that thinking and the confidence in the customers and the stakeholders. So that's what I would say, in a nutshell.
Thank you, Sudhir. That was fantastic. Right? So we clearly talked about 3 points. One is the pace at which it is changing, and surely, on a positive note, tech is the key leader. Right? That is fantastic. Now, Aarati, you run a very different set. Right? You represent the SME segment of the industry. The challenges and the constraints are different, and so are the opportunities. But where do you see is the next big growth for you coming in from the SME space?
I think very rightly said, Kamesh, and I'd like to kind of carry forward Sudhir said. Some of the challenges that Sudhir talked about is also a big challenge faced by the SMEs. The cost-conscious outsourcing has changed to the value-based outsourcing. The SME players are, I think, also challenged by the fact about competing with the big boys, especially in the fast-paced technology space. You got to do a lot of investment in new technology, in a lot of investment in research, and most of importantly in this space, I think it's not about one size fits all, whether it's technology or any solution that I think it's all about customized solution. From my perspective, I think any enterprise in the small and medium space should look at doing technology partnerships, given the fact that the change of pace for technology in this business, and look at really automation, which is really using automations as well as the human loop. I would invest really strongly in building up strong capabilities within your businesses that can help work with the new technologies. And sometimes technologies take a long time to catch up. Speech, for example, people often think whether the speech technology or the emotion analytics curve is kind of come and gone. I think it's as relevant today as it was 5 years ago when everybody was talking about it, and now everybody's talking about AI and ML, but it still has huge value. And I think the value comes in how do you use these technologies and the rapid changes that are happening in these technologies and extract the actionable insights from that. And that's what companies like us, we've been focusing our capabilities in, really in the human part of it. Understanding technology, understanding what we can do with those technologies, and training our teams to be able to work with technologies could be through different partners, or even many times clients have their own technology. So you have to be comfortable on different platforms, but be able to work through this. And I think the wave is really coming in. As I said, I think speech and emotional analytics is not a done thing. I think there's a huge wave coming there. I think capabilities in terms of content moderation for the smaller players who are trying to get into the e-commerce space, that's another area that people should focus on building solutions that can help the SMEs in the e-commerce space who have really not been able to take advantage or are just beginning to take advantage of the huge potential that online sales can kind of give them. I think taxonomy is another thing that I think it kind of plays into my previous point, is helping companies build future enabled taxonomies, because that's changing so rapidly. What was relevant yesterday, in many ways, the lingo has changed. Look at grocery shopping we're all doing. I think 5 years ago, people weren't looking at organic, and tomorrow there'll be something new that comes up. And you need to be able to have an ability to kind of stay abreast and be able to work with technologies that kind of keep all of the taxonomies updated so that you can be relevant in this whole online space. And I think retail moving online is a huge area that anybody in my space could actually focus on.
Thank you so much, Aarati. Beautifully explained. Now, Ravi, to you. We know the challenge, the nudge towards digital transformation is externally induced. Both Aarati and Sudhir talked about how it impacts the people who deal with it on a daily basis, how it impacts the service delivery organizations quite often. Now, if I have to ask you about your opinion about how is this digital transformation, how is usage of data analytics in the way the industry is adopted impacted the industry? What is your viewpoint on that?
So as my panelists said, there are two things which I think leads to increased automation. Number one is that it has to solve some real life problems. Okay. I think it's very, very important that people don't use automation for automation's sake. It has to go and solve some problems, right? And I'll give you some examples. Example number one is if you were to look at the way in which payments has played out in India, I think today we have IMPS, which is instantaneous, right? So it is now immediate where you can make payments and there is no friction. Now, if I were to rewind and look at it 5 years before, it used to be T+1, T+2, depending on what kind of payments are you making, whether it's RTGS or it's going to be an NEFT. Now, to me, I think what's enabled it is technology, right? So it's either creating shorter transaction life cycles, or it's getting better in terms of customer experience, or it is doing better risk control for the companies, right? So I think it's very important for us to keep in mind saying that automation has to solve real world problems, right? And when you look at automation, it does not mean just using RPA, it's an end-to-end, right from the digital front end to data, right? Which really leads me to your question as to what is the industry doing, what are our clients doing, and what is the entire reaction of having smart technologies on digital analytics on solving some of these problems, okay? So if you think about it, and I will give you an example again, Netflix, right? And this is again a real world example about how data is used, right? Today, if you look at any production house in the movie industry, the hit rate of a box office is roughly about 30 to 40%, okay? Which means that if you produce 100 movies, there's a chance that 30% of it can make some money for you in the box office, right? The equivalent hit rate for Netflix is upwards of 70%. Okay. Now, why is it so? It's because what happens is Netflix uses the data of their consumer base. They exactly know what's the taste of each of them demographically, and they start commissioning content depending on their audience, right? So the chances that there will be a lot of consumption of their content of the existing audience is very, very high. So that's the way data and analytics are used. The idea is to cater to your customer segment by using the data which you have. Now, this is one example which I gave you. The same applies to a Walmart, or same applies to an Amazon, same applies to a Klarna Bank, or same applies to any of the digital startups in India like Bharat Pay or UPI or Paytm. Now, the question for us to answer is this going to be the way in which going forward, where people will start using what I would call as skew data or the most basic data accumulated to solve real world problems? And I do believe, and I'm a big proponent of saying that this will be a trend. Anybody who doesn't sit onto the bus would have probably missed it.
Absolutely. Okay, right. This is a way, right? You have just one option, that is to ride the wave, or else you permanently get on. So, but I would have loved to also hear perspectives around the impact digital transformations makes on the people who work through it, right?
Sure.
Co-working aspect around how people have to deal with it, the skills of the future. It has also, reshaped some of our own original thinking of, having to come into office and work. But that is for another round, Ravi. But thank you so much for that. Now, Manish, you've been an observer of this industry for decades. You've built a great product, and you know what the industry needs. Now, based on how you see industry react to various waves of change, do you believe that in this wave, and all the high-powered digital and analytics, does it deliver the full value to the business? If yes, what are those few measures that you would like to measure yourself on with respect to the transformation that you contribute into the business?
Yeah, thank you, Kamath, and all the producers who have contributed a lot of valid contents and the knowledge. Yeah, I think it has been a privilege to work with India market for last 22 years plus, and I think last 2 years has been significantly different than the journey we have seen in terms of evolving of the digital transformation to automation today. So I think the pandemic has created a deep, lasting impact on all of us as being a consumer or being a workforce of this organization. Definitely, the digital transformation has been the slogan for every enterprise, and there is a fast-paced adaptation has happened. So basically, there are more channels, more interactions happening across the channels, which means the consumer has a kind of multiple choice options available how and when they would like to get engaged. That is a totally their choice of journey, customer journey, and they are into this. So it is imperatively build big load on enterprise to almost real time listen to them, regardless of the channel they use to engage with enterprise. It can be voice, it can be email, chat, text, social media. Regardless of those, the enterprise has to listen to them almost real time and act real time. So I think the analytics is actually falling flat, which earlier started, part of the digital transformations, and actually it was applied in a siloed in the organization. If you are in charge of the digital marketing, then you are going to see the consumer behavior within that space only. But we are forgetting that there is a lot of rippling impact, whether your mobile app will have impact on the call falling to the call center, or the consumer walking to the branch or to the franchise retail store. Okay, so end of the day, the customer journey extended from one digital area to all the way to meet face-to-face meetings, and an organization who has no ability to map this analytics across this multiple channel, the same consumer doing, then I think you're going to see a lot of different the results, and that actually being now corrected after the post-pandemic era, where everybody realized that fast pace of digital transformation has evolved to make the enterprise to become smarter. They have to take care of the analytics to make sure that they have a successful employee engagement and not only the touch point experience at one side. So and same time find a balance between the self-service versus assisted service, human assisted service. Human assisted is not going to go, but you must have analytics across both so that you can measure and then get the balance between the self-service and the human assisted service. It will be not sustainable. Just keep on putting your money on digital while ignoring the human service. Vice versa, you just focus on the human and don't focus on the digital. Don't bring the balance. End of the day, then the successful outcome, which is we call it elevated customer experience, is going to be impacted. So that's why the enterprise analytics across the channel with the AI and automation, with the cloud transformation, I think makes a lot of sense, and that's what we will see it in the next post-pandemic era, more and more being absorbed by the banking, financial, or BPOs, as well as the manufacturing sector as well. So yeah, that is the point from my side.
Thank you, Manish. So we're going to see a lot of cloud, a lot of analytics, a lot of automation coming in, especially on the customer services segment. Makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much for that. We have the last panelist joining us. We thought we'll allow Mukesh to warm up a couple of minutes before we bring him live. Thank you, Mukesh, for joining in. So just as an introduction, Mukesh is a technocrat with over 25 years of experience. Right? He's been in the product OEM, he's been in the services, and he spends most of his time in managing innovations, in delivering product engineering, and delivering service delivery, and making tech consumable for his clients. Mukesh brings in a whole lot of enthusiasm in bringing new ideas to life, and he will share his views on how we enhance the value of outsourcing industry using product-based methodology. Mukesh, the next one is for you.
Sure.
With outsourcing, we've seen the world becoming flat, and with digital and analytics, it's a level playing field for everyone in the value chain. As a service provider, how do you intend to stay relevant? Where is that edge, and what do you think is necessary as a service provider to bring up on it?
Sure. Thank you. And apologies for the delay. I'm in US, and by the time I reached the hotel, it was delayed. Sorry about that. See, my experience of 25 plus years, most of the time I was working for product companies like Microsoft and Geo and other places. Recently, I joined Capgemini, and I could see that more and more the service provider are getting into productizing small pieces. So gone are the days that everything will be that, okay, fine, make a custom made. But custom made has its own challenges. We all know that, right? The bugs, the stabilization, and the time it takes, a lot of wastage compared to if you start creating the products. That is first part of it. Second part of it is, now all this part of it, like AI, analytics, when you talk about it, some of them has to be standardized. Now, remember when we used to write code, right? C, Java, Python, and everything, a lot of checks were done so that the code is robust. At the same time, when we are doing it on the sides of custom made and everything, we may not be able to do as much, primarily because okay, fine, your main purpose is to get the feature done rather than making it robust. Now, with the change of more productization, we can see things you should be able to buy a smaller module. Of course, some of them are open, so some of them you can buy and plug and play, and you make it things work. So now, a typical scenario, if you see, especially in the BPO case, several modules are available. For some of them on the gamification side of it, some of them on the voice analytics side of it, and it actually can now do sentiment as well on the voice itself, rather than translating into text and then doing it. A simple example: if somebody asks me and if I say, "Yeah, right," it's a positive, affirmative statement. Compared to if somebody asks me a question and I say, "Yeah, right," totally different meaning, right? But when you translate it into text, it has the same meaning. So all those things, new innovation need to come into part and has to be started at the grassroots level. Those are some of the parts. When I say grassroots level, which means started in the colleges and then doing it. Last 10 years for me, being in India, one of the things which I've going to colleges and getting some of the syllabus change, so that in the third year itself, final itself, they got cognizant. Students are cognizant about this new innovation, and they can start adopting those. Becomes more easy, and that's why we'll see more innovation going forward. So that will be my take on this.
Thank you, Mukesh. Right, so the future has to be plugged in way earlier in the value chain. Thank you so much for this. And I know for sure, Shivakumar would have, been super excited when he said, "Gone are the days of custom code. It's all about products." Shivakumar, no better time than to bring you in. You have been there, done that, built multiple products. Now, as an product owner, what are the challenges? Right? How do you ensure that you manage the data security aspect, the regulatory aspect, and convincing the clients to say, "I'm okay to listen to all your conversations on the cloud and deliver great value"? What challenges have you faced, and how do you handle this on a daily basis?
Thank you. So it's not as much a problem today as it used to be maybe 5-6 years ago. I think by and large, people have come to terms that cloud is the way forward. So the questions are now more about how do we make cloud secure as against is cloud secure? I hope you see the difference, right? So in fact, nowadays, when we go and speak to customers, actually, there are only two reasons why they talk to us. One is, are you on the cloud? And the second one is, do you have bots? So, these are the really only two conversation starters with customers. The original cloud promise is something like this. So 10 years ago, when I went to customers, I said, look, don't buy hardware and wires and set up all of these things in your office. This is anyways not your core field of expertise. We're going to now put this all on the cloud and life is going to be glorious, right? So that was the original cloud pitch, if you think about it. And naturally, I'm implying that it's going to be more scalable. It's going to be more secure. There's going to be no power outages. Hard disks are not going to crash. Reliability is at the heart of every cloud company, and every cloud company should spend as much of the money that they can in improving reliability in general, but security specifically, because that's the original cloud promise that we went to the customers with. So I think the space has evolved quite a bit. There are standard pen tests now that are recommended. There are consultants who actually help you with managing security. Large cloud providers have their own best practices that needs to be managed. In our own company, we have ISO, we're working on GDPR and a bunch of other compliances ourselves. There is data obfuscation, data encryption, and a whole bunch of other practices that we take up internally. Then there is data localization. So we don't actually keep all the data abroad. We keep it in India, not just in India, in multiple places. And there is, of course, private cloud versus public cloud. Private cloud slightly more secure than public cloud. You can recreate the cloud in a data center. You can recreate the cloud in your own office if you want. So I think there are many ways of orchestrating cloud depending on the comfort of the customer. But like I said, I think the question is no longer is cloud secure? The question is, how do we make cloud secure?
Thank you, Shivakumar. I'll come to you, Ravi. Thank you so much, Shivakumar. Right. While the articulation has moved away from is it secure, the question is, how do we continue to keep it secure, as well as the fact that cloud is the future. You might as well, find ways to work through it than, avoid it. Ravi, you have a point?
Yeah, I think the point which Shiv made is well taken. I think the question is not about cloud or not. I think when we see some of these sectors, I think one of the things which comes in is, will the regulators allow for it? It's not that cloud is not secure, that it can't do the job. I think it's more from a compliance and a regulations perspective. And, Manish should understand this better, because in Singapore, some of the governments are very, very strong in looking at cloud and what is going to be the controls around the cloud. I think a lot of governments are now coming around it. But clearly, to me, I think as we probably fast forward 5 years down the line, I think it will be definitely cloud, which will start being the first option rather than being a channel today. Right?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ravi. Yeah, couldn't agree more. So Sudhir, to you, we find this the word value is possibly overused. Right? We got OEMs, product owners talking about value generation. We got consultant service providers talking about value, right? But purely as as a service seeker, what is the expectations of value delivery for you, right? From a partner who's with you on the digital transformation journey, and how do you define it?
Kamesh, I think I segment into 4 pillars, I would say, from my experience. Usually when a service provider comes, they always come with their agenda. Instead of that, they should start understanding and hearing out what are the business agenda for the client, what business challenges are we facing. Because as I mentioned, every industry is different, every client is different, their challenges will be different. So the perspective mind from a client point of view and client challenges has to be well understood. Second, in terms of what is the business value, in terms of efficiency and effectiveness, they can add value. Because as an shared service industry or an organization, we are looking at, before going to choosing whether we should go for a captive or a BPO, we always weigh in on what kind of value, if you go to a provider, would drive for us, right? The third important element is the best practices, because we might have a limited view as a service seekers, being a captive organization, but certainly as a BPOs or a service providers, they will have a wide variety of views and practices and value they've been adding to other clients. So can they really bring those to our organization as well, right? That's the fourth element. The other fifth element is, as you all know, that everyone is struggling for the talent. You have to either build, buy, or borrow, right? So what the value as a BPOs can really look at, or providers can look at, is what is the high-end skill set you can really bring to the table, right? Are you giving us a mediocre talent or a hypo talent in your organization? Those all things really matter. And that's where the holistic view of value will really come, and that's where a lot of organizations are now thinking, what is a decision point for us to go for a captive, our own setup of shared services, or should we look at a BPO who is matured, have done it, flawlessly, and have been scaling up with the value, right? I think I'll also want to touch base here that gone are the days where the organization is looking at the routine kind of the billing models, or the financial models of a transactional or an FTE business models. Now the business models are moving up to the value. Okay, you enhance my profits, you take a share of it. You give us me an ROI, right, committed ROI, take a profit share on that. So as an organization, we also have our value improvement programs. We have the cost pressures like any other organizations. And that's where the partnership, when we say partnership is a broad umbrella, but if you can categorize this partnership into a segmented way, and showcase the value to the service seekers, I'm sure anyone would be interested to join, whether it is a technology enablement, your value you're bringing in, whether people perspective you're bringing in value, or from a business point of view you're bringing in value. I'm sure those will be the big three areas, and obviously the customer delight, where you're trying to help them the wow factor eventually. So that's what I would summarize in terms of how as a service seeker someone would be looking at.
Great point, Sudhir. Beautifully articulated. Thank you so much for that. So it's time for gain sharing mechanism. It's not the FP model, which will take us, forward for too long. With that, I would like to, take some views from Aarati. Aarati, you run a very, very tight ship. But do you think is innovation, analytics, digital the only key to success? Do you think the linearity, of the business models is not viable anymore, or is it also segregated across?
That's a very good question, and I think the short answer for the innovation, automation being key to success is yes, but I think the longer answer is, as you just rightly said, I think the two have to coexist. There is a space for both segments. And I think if you really look at, to me, it's about relevance. Even whatever you do in terms of innovation and automation, it really has to be relevant and see how we're adding value to the end user. I think all of us at some point or the other have got stuck in this never-ending bot loop where you're trying to contact a company and you just go through one bot connect to another bot connect, and you finally get thrown into a live agent queue just to wait for like 20 minutes, and then you shut off and you go right back into the bot queue, and that's really not relevant. And so that's a really good example of use of implementation of a good technology but badly implemented. So I think to us, whenever we look at any solution, whether it is for a customer in the SME space or a large company, you got to really look at how relevant is the solution that you're bringing to the table. I think secondly, to me, if you look at this entire gambit of the linear space, or as Sudhir talked about, or I think Mukesh talked about the billing models and all of that, I think that still has some relevance today. Yes, you need to bring in more automation, you need to bring in a use of technology to that to make it far more efficient. But there's going to be the cost players are going to still be there, and you have to decide as a company, where do you want to be in that gambit? Do you want to be at the bottom end, but there's still margins to be made? They're probably very thin margins, and those get eaten up. But I think those are players that still exist in the market and probably will continue. But to really go up the value chain, I think what's really important is actionable insights for your customers. No matter what technology you use, you need to go back and look at how are we providing insights that can enable our customers or our clients rather to make actionable decisions for their end users. This is a fairly crowded space, and I think the people who survive are the ones who I think who can dumb it down. Very often, I think we get caught up in the tech lingos, and I'm not a tech person, so I can take shots at everybody else on the panel. But I think as much as we can dumb it down, especially when we look at actionable information back, I think that's what's really going to be very relevant. And going back to what Mukesh said earlier, I think as whether we do it as an industry or working with the government, we got to bring that to our colleges. I think the fear of innovation, the fear of working with new technologies, the fear of failure, I think is still very high. And I think our young people coming out of colleges need to be able to take chances. They need to be far more incubators being set up. And whether that leads to a viable business model or not is not relevant right now. I think we need to enable our youngsters to be able to think innovatively, not be shy of new technologies and new automations that are coming out of the market. And I think that's what I find is a big lack today in our industry, being competitive with, let's just say, any other market out there. And I think we need to do that better. But as I said, I made a long answer or a short question, long answer, is everything needs to be relevant, and we need to let our people get comfortable with all of that and then see what's the relevance of all of those. And going back to what I said earlier, there is a human angle to everything, and we need to bring in our technologies and tie it back to the human loop. So even in the bot example, you need to have a seamless integration from bot to the human engagement that most companies have, but many still fail. And I think that's where the insights come. And you need to look at your technology, look at where the failure points are, look at what are the areas that are pushing a customer to get into wanting a direct conversation with an agent rather than getting the answers through an online model. And for that, we require to innovate all the time. We need to update your technology, update your workflow so that you can stay abreast of what other new challenges are coming in the market. And the pandemic has been a great example of what everybody had to do and more in this space. And I know that's kind of overspoken about the pandemic, but frankly, that's a reality that Omicron has told us is not going away very, very soon. So we need to keep innovating in this space to update whatever documents that were relevant yesterday may not even be relevant today. So maybe 1 week later, there'll be something new coming up. So my only key to everybody in this, in my space, especially in the SME, and you don't have a lot of dollars to invest in technology, is choose that's most relevant and go back to looking at linear models may be still relevant for you, but how do you update that to get a price point?
Great. Thank you so much, Ravi. Right, make innovation cyclic. Start from early, make it relevant. But the thing which really caught my attention is the point Sudhir made. Right, in fact, he pushed an agenda here when he said, "Let's go into gain sharing," and I could see ripples getting created already. But looking forward to that. But if you have to look at the boundaries innovation, can take or ROI can take, right? Shiv, this is for you. Where is that boundary where you would stop bots, cobots, AI, and hand it over to human completely? Right? It could be because AI is not able to catch up with the imagination of you, or it could be that's the boundary where you will break and ROI into negatives. And what is the boundary, and how do you measure this for your clients?
You seem to have all the tough questions for me. Especially predicting the future of AI is, I think, I'm really scared of talking about it, but why don't I try? So I think I tend to think of AI, especially in our industry, somewhat similar to, let's say, a machine that helps a construction worker. So there was a time when they were carrying all the bricks by hand, and then naturally tools kind of came in, and then it made the job of the construction worker easier and easier. But none of that meant that we needed lesser construction workers, because the pace of construction increased, the requirements increased, the market increased, and so real estate now is as booming as ever, isn't it? So something similar is how I kind of think about AI in our space. I think in general, it is reasonable to assume that most of the stupid work we should get the computer to do. Repetitive work, mundane work, stupid work. And mostly humans will end up tending to do knowledge work or work that computers may not be able to do. So I also do agree with you that the warm handover of conversations or context between bots and agents and vice versa, sometimes actually not just agents, right? Bots, applications and agents. So there are 3 endpoints. That's a bit clumsy today. It's not really thought through, but that will evolve. So service-related questions, simple questions, all of that bots should do. And more complicated questions, non-service related, imagining solutions. I think some of those work, I think humans will continue to do. I also think that there's going to be a small change in the way people manage bots, manage AI. So right now, I think AI companies manage AI, and I think they kind of take data from companies, then they do extract, transform, load, and then kind of train the bots. I think going forward, I do expect that the domain owners, the managers, to kind of play a big role in keeping the AI trained and up to date. So it will sort of become like one of the reportees, if you will. So those are some of the thoughts that kind of come in my mind. But there is a concept in technology called singularity, which basically states that the pace of innovation will tend towards infinity. and as time progresses. So I would also conclude by saying that it is very it's difficult of us to presume about what's going to happen in AI in the coming days.
Now you know why I asked this question, Shiv, right? You know where to step on, what not to step on, and you did that brilliantly today. Thank you so much. But the impact of digital transformation on the industry, and there was one topic that we really wanted to go in, which is all this non-linearity in business, all the transformations, all these automations do impact the morale of your team, right? We got distributed team, we got teams which have never walked into offices for the last 2 years. How do you manage, this team, right? Which is separated, distributed. How do you bring in the culture? How do you train them? How do you keep them fit to be, used for a purpose?
Thanks, Kamesh. I think several things. I think when you look at automation is just not for the clients, it's also for your internal staff, right? So I think Aarati referred to this in the last 2 years. I think as Lennon would say, I think sometimes for decades, no innovation happens, and sometimes in a few weeks, decades of innovation happen, right? And I think the pandemic was a very classical example of how, when we thought that India would never be able to send its workers who are in the ODCs, in the offices back home, everybody were able to do that, right? So clearly, I think there were two fallouts of those, right? Number one is human interactions completely ceased, where face-to-face, which was a very great source of learning and grooming, completely got lost, right? The second thing, what I would say as an industry didn't budget for, is the mental wellness. All of us do talk about financial wellness, physical wellness. Now, this new thing which has come through is mental wellness, right? And it's more to do with having people working in isolation day in and day out, where the lines between a weekday and a weekend blurs, right? So think about, and I've had some of my colleagues in the US, and we have got a very generous footprint in the US, where people actually get dressed, move from their hall to their basement, which is their office, as if they are going to office. They actually step out of the door, right? They go out of the door and come back to give them the feeling that they are now in office, and then they do a similar thing to see that they switch off. Now, this is not trivial, okay? To me, I think each one of us, the large companies, do have a doctor on call. We have a psychiatrist in house, largely because technology, which is really isolating people, is now creating new dimensions with the human mind. So one of the fallouts which we had to grapple with because of this entire pandemic and the automation is impact on humans, right? Now, I would presume that as we go along, the hybrid way of working can come back. But as of now, clearly to me, I think it's work from home for large parts of our organization, right? The second interesting thing which we saw is on the entire thing around privacy, okay? I think a lot of us, especially when we deal with large banks, have to deal with PII, which is personally identifiable information, right? Now, this is a very big thing as far as, and people spoke about GDPR. US has got a more stringent law over there, where anything which is in breach can have legal repercussions, right? So how do you deal with that becomes a huge issue. When you are in a secure office environment where you're perimeterized, you know for sure that data can't have any breaches because you don't allow for smartphones to be operated inside the floor. Now, once you put this into a work from home environment, what happens, right? So we have been innovating again over there by using some proctoring solutions. So essentially what it does is it does a monitoring on using the webcam, which is in the laptop. And if a person is going to be clicking a picture of a transaction, right, it reports a breach. So I think a lot of these innovations have happened largely because you want to now start looking at the last mile breach, and can you then stop that? Now this is not foolproof, but essentially you still have to work with this so that you don't have a breach which comes along because of data privacy. So the second impact of having distributed workforce is the impact on data and data privacy, right? The third impact, which I would say, is largely on the meaning of an organization, right? Now, if you know, India has done phenomenally well during the pandemic, right? And if you look at the NASSCOM data or any data which is coming out, the Indian ITES companies are now bigger exporters than Saudi Arabian oil, right? We are going to be touching closer to $100 billion, right? Now, this is phenomenal, right? Now, the issue which we have to grapple with because of that is, how do you now keep sustaining this entire thing, and how do you keep managing this entire thing? And how do you now bring them together to say that you are now a part of Mphasis or you're a part of any of the other large companies? So I think engagement, employee engagement, whether it's going to be using a combination of social media tools like Yammers or looking at WhatsApp and creating your own apps, adapting to that inside the company becomes very important. Rewards and recognitions, doing celebrations, bringing people together in a kind of a side chats is going to be extremely important. And I think the engagement level is something which we are underestimated. And now I think in the midst of pandemic, we really, ratcheted up. And I think that's, again, the third impact which we see. And again, to me, it's work in progress. Okay.
Thank you so much, Ravi. I've been instructed to consume less time as we move forward. So we just have time for one last question. That's such a shame, but we'll have to work through that. Now, Sudhir, before we summarize, is the industry geared up enough to effectively leapfrog from where we are today into the future? What are those foundations that people have to take if they have to start from scratch? Sudhir?
Yeah, let's talk in the mute. So I will keep it very short and crisp. I think one of the challenges, we often hear about the word digital and digital transformation, very oftenly used word. It's not everyone have a common understanding what that means, right? Second, people focus a lot more on technology without understanding the organization readiness. And I've seen organization struggling, first focusing on technology and then figuring out, is my organization ready for this kind of transformation? So I would say that, it is easy somehow to understand technology, but it's very difficult to understand the people in the organization who actually make this technology success. So I would always say that focus on the people readiness and the organization readiness before you jump on to bring in a technology to make a transformation. And most of the people think that, by bringing a new technology, investing in it, things will change or things will transform. Without underestimating the effort of the whole change management, the organization change management is equally important. And that's where I would say that, we have to balance between what this new technology or an automation can really bring value. Certainly that will bring a value, but in terms of how do we implement it, how do we ensure that people who are executors of the technology are onboarded on it? Do we have enough sponsorship in the organization? I think these all really matters in terms of how we balance between the technology and the people and the whole ecosystem of the organization. So that's what my comments on that, Kamesh.
So thank you so much. Right, I quickly summarize and then hand this over back to Deepti. But I've had amazing time listening to all of you. I took home some notes which I hopefully circulate. But on the outset, right, it's just perfect storm for business to gear up and transform. And tech is surely an enabler for, for moving away from the cost aspect and getting GCCs and shared services centers, BPOs to move into value generators. And the way to do that is look at people first and engage with people because they got distributed aspect, and know what your boundaries are, make innovation relevant. Thank you so much for this. Deepti, back to you, please.